Welcome to another episode of Hey Fightin Podcast. As always, Cody Worsham here. Joined today by Daronte Jones, LSU defensive coordinator, on a special live edition of the podcast. Coach, appreciate your time. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Coach, before we get to the fan questions, just fill me in on what the last couple months have been like for you, getting settled in and into a new home and into a new position here with LSU.
It's been good, actually. So, as you can imagine, things got started pretty fast with taking the job and getting ready for spring ball. And I thought spring ball was positive. A lot of good things came out of that, and got a chance to know the guys, got a chance to know the staff, right? We're a new staff as well, and just kind of get engulfed into the LSU culture. And then right now we've just been doing some self-scout, which has been good. So, again, just trying to look at things that we need to improve on and go from there. But I think so far everything's been great.
So speaking of the spring game, we all watched. We saw. I think we liked what we saw defensively. Looked like your guys played pretty well. Secondary made a lot of plays. What can you read into a spring game that you saw from your defense after getting 15 practices with them, getting them some live reps? What did you learn about your defense?
Well, they play with a lot of energy, which is good. And for us, we just wanted to focus on just bringing energy and effort and letting the guys play fast if possible. And I thought the guys was on an upward trend with that, starting from where we were. They felt comfortable in the system, so that was good. They started to get an understanding of the system and what we're asking them to do, and just do it to the highest of your ability and the best of your ability. And we talked about effort. Effort was one of the biggest focal points in the off season and in spring. And effort, we always say is between you and you, and so just challenging the guys in that way. It may not be right all the time, and you're going to make mistakes, but just give great effort. We can fix everything else.
All right, first question from one of our season ticket holders. This one's from Patrick Quint. For those of us that aren't technically savvy with defensive terminology, can you break down how you take existing inherited players and work with their strengths and weaknesses to bring them effectively into your scheme and the challenges associated with that? Great question, Patrick.
Well, so that's one of the things, Patrick, that coming here understanding what is it that our guys do well. And you want to take – every person's going to be different. Every player is going to be different, right? So you want to try to put them in the best position possible. And so we always say, what I wanted to do here was we are players first, scheme second. If our players can't execute man coverage, for example, then I probably shouldn't be calling man. If our players are best in pressures, attacking style, man-to-man coverage, then you want to do more. So to hone in on that question – try to limit situations where they cannot be successful. And now, again, you're going to have a whole unit. So when you're talking about 11 guys on the football field, everyone's going to have their strengths and weaknesses. And so you try to dictate the coverages and you try to make calls to whereas guys can maximize their strengths and minimize their weaknesses of getting exposed. And then you understand offense is going to try to do certain things to create those mismatches, and then you got to have answers for that. So, one, to answer your question, to understand what each person does specifically well. When I came here, there were guys that you was like, okay, he does A, B, C very well. All right, D, E, F, not so much. And then you have a book of those players, and you have a strength and weaknesses, and then you try to game plan accordingly and match up with the scheme.
Great question, great answer. I'm a botch this name, so I apologize. Ruark Hotop said, of all the coaches you've worked with in your career, who has had the largest influence on you and why? I've asked coaches that before. I know it's hard to pin it down to a single coach because so many of them have impact. So I'm going to open up the door for you a little bit. You can name a couple coaches.
You know what? I would probably start with my position coach in college. And the reason why I say that is because he's the one who got me into coaching.
Mm-hmm.
And so Dexter Davis, who's currently the team chaplain for the Atlanta Falcons, was my position coach in college. I got injured. I couldn't play anymore. I was down in the dumps, and he got me into coaching. He said, hey, come work with me, help me out. You're a captain, guys that respect you. And so to me, that's the biggest influence because I wouldn't be here if it had not been for him investing in me that way. And he's kind of like a spiritual father. And so there's so many coaches along the way. It's kind of hard to pinpoint.
Sure.
I thought I learned from Coach Darrell Day when I was here at Nicholls State.
Go Colonels.
I was very young in coaching at that aspect in that time, and kind of just, this is how you become a coach. This is how you recruit. This is the things you need to do. And so he helped me. Google Maps wasn't around back then. You had a real map. And so you can get lost on the road recruiting in Mississippi.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, hey, just look for the water tower. So just different things like that. But having Daryl Day, I think, Coach Zeb Simon at the high school ranks in Louisiana has been huge. That is where my coaching style kind of adjusted and changed.
Mm-hmm.
I was so really that's the Louisiana influence,
sure,
right, at Nicholls State and then at Jeanneret and at Franklin, and more so Jeanneret with Coach Simon, and understanding players in Louisiana, they attach to you emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just really business; it's about that relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I started to really hone in on the importance of building relationship with players, and so that's where he implemented that in me. And then, moving forward, also my time in Louisiana, Vance Joseph became a mentor of mine. So, me and Mickey Joseph were working together. Mickey took me under his wing.
Mm-hmm.
So I slept on Mickey's couch when I was at Nicholls State.
Wow.
And so, I was 21, 22 years old. And so, getting with Mickey, but meeting Vance through Mickey became a mentor of mine in the coaching world. And so we taught defensive back play, learned some techniques from him and things of that nature, and it kind of came full circle when I went to work with him at Miami. Coach Aranda at Wisconsin, watching how he approaches the game,
mm-hmm.
His mental approach in terms of the preparation and the things that he looked at. I thought Dave saw the game differently, more of a professor,
mm-hmm.
right? And so I always like to pick up things from that. And so just watching his preparation, and then moving forward to being able to be under two great NFL minds, like a Marvin Lewis, like a Mike Zimmer.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same foundation defensively, right? Marvin had an unspeakable relationship with players, and I had a chance to watch him work, because Marvin made his day as a defensive coordinator with the
mm-hmm.
Ravens, as we all know. And he had one of the best defenses in the history of football
mm-hmm.
with the Ravens, right? But as a head coach, you're kind of away from that. Well, when I was at Cincinnati, the first year, he made a change as at the coordinator position,
mm-hmm.
and so he took over the play calling. And now I started to see, okay, now it's not Marvin Lewis, the head coach,
mm-hmm.
and the structure and the organization. Now it's Marvin Lewis, the defensive coordinator.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm like, okay, wow, how does he see it that way?
Mm-hmm.
What is he looking at? And you could see his mind churning, and you can see how he calls games. And I had a front row seat of why he's one of the best, and why he had so much success at the Baltimore Ravens and even at Washington Redskins when he was a defensive coordinator. And the Cincinnati defense is why he was there, And so I had a chance to learn from him a lot. And then Mike Zimmer, only 1 year under Mike Zimmer, but his approach to the game, he sees it differently. I think what you see from all these guys, they're all great defensive minds in their own right. With Mike, with Marvin Lewis, with Dave Aranda, in terms of defensive minds. Vance Joseph, all these guys are great in their defensive minds in their own right, and they have a different perspective from it. So you try to pick and choose what to grab and how does it fit you.
Yeah.
But then on the flip side of it, I don't want to get long with it, but on the flip side of it, I had a chance to be around some great offensive minds as well.
Mm-hmm.
Starting, Norm Child. We worked together at Hawaii and at UCLA.
Yeah.
Had a chance to, see how I was a huge West Coast offensive fan when I was growing up. So learning some things under Norm, and then Rick Neuhauser, an offensive mind, was there. Mark Trestman, who pretty much is a staple, not only in the NFL, he has 17 years of NFL experience, but also what he's done in the CFL, winning multiple championship Grey Cups there. And so watching how they attack defenses, Adam Gase, when he was at, Miami Dolphins and what we did this first year there.
Mm-hmm.
But just watching those guys, one, they don't respect defense coaches at all. So that's the first thing that I learned. They don't think defensive coaches know anything, right? But I remember it changed my thought process, especially when I was with Mark Trestman, because I grew up as a defensive guy.
Mm-hmm.
And defense wins championships, right? So this is the big debate.
Mm-hmm.
What wins championships? And so, I said, Coach, defense wins championships, And Mark Trestman, the quarterback guy, and offensive guy. He said, no, Daronte, no, they don't. Great quarterbacks win championships. And I said, what? And I said, nah, coach. And he said, okay, let's go down this list. This was back in 2010 or 11, right? He said, let's go down the list. He said, now don't get me wrong, there are some teams that's above and beyond.
Sure.
They're the exception. They're not the rule.
Sure.
I mentioned the Ravens.
Yeah, I better say you think of the Ravens, Ray Lewis.
He said, okay. I said, Tampa Bay Bucks, when they won with Sean King as a coach. He said, okay. I said, Pittsburgh Steelers. He said, they had Roethlisberger.
Yeah.
Right. I said, and so he mentioned Roethlisberger. He mentioned Drew Brees at the time, the Tom Brady's, Peyton Manning's. He said, if you don't have a star quarterback or a great quarterback, it's hard to win a championship. And so that kind of resonated with me. I still believe defense wins championships at the end of the day.
Of course you do.
But I think, certain quarterbacks like the Aaron Rodgers of the world, they can compensate for a lot of different things.
Well, I mean, I think you even saw it this year with Tampa Bay. Not that Tom Brady isn't a great quarterback.
Oh,
but,
he is.
But
I faced him a couple of times. He is.
Yeah, but if they don't have Devin White on that defense, then
Exactly.
Exactly.
And one of the things you saw with that, I know, like the New York Giants, when they upset the New England Patriots that year. Well, my argument was, having the ability to rush 4 at those great quarterbacks and play coverage like New York Giants did when they had Yossi and all those guys, and like what Tampa Bay was able to do this past year. So at the end of the day, it comes back around to defense.
Yeah, so. Smoking like a true defensive coordinator. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to hop in the chat or in the Q&A. We have one from Lucy on the board. Have you determined which base defensive scheme you are likely to use with the personnel you will have this fall? If you prefer, will you describe your defensive philosophy? So if any Alabama offensive coordinators are listening right now, just plug your ears up as Coach goes into his defensive philosophy. But I was curious to see what y'all would look like schematically in the spring game, and I know you don't bring out all the fancy stuff, but just from a base perspective, it was interesting to see how you rolled those guys out there. But you mentioned a number of defensive coaches who have very different schematic approaches. Yes. So how do you to expand on that question, to describe your defensive philosophy, how do you develop a schematic philosophy? Is it different for each team depending on personnel? Do you have something that you feel better about?
It's generated personnel based.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't want to be and at the end of the day, right, they're all, like I said before, they're all numbers, whether you're 3-4, whether you're 4-3, it's still just numbers up front. Because the game is different. The game is spread out so much nowadays. But it does change in terms of how you're aligning. So it's not so much of the numbers, it's more so the alignment of those guys. And so you want to put, what our identity is, and we're, I think we have some very talented defensive linemen. And so whether it's a 3-4, whether it's a 4-3, for other people who may be listening, we're just going to try to put the best 11 out on the football field. But we're going to be fundamentally and technique sound. We want to be, like we call it, a smart, tough, dependable defense, minimize the error, be on the same page. We want to show some toughness when we're out there. We talk about that violent demeanor. I mean, it's just a violent football game.
Yep.
And so when you look at LSU's defense, things that we would like for you to pull from after the game is over was, wow, those guys were tough. They were physical. They gave great effort. They were fundamentally sound. It's never going to be perfect, right? But it's going to be fundamentally sound. And that ties into the communication, and so those are the things that you would like to pull from.
Another question here from, I think, Leslie Harrington. Yeah, the name kind of cut out there. Said, who have you noticed that has stepped up that we might not think of? Again, kind of like the coach question. It's hard to single out individuals. But who are some of the guys in that defensive room that have been stepping up?
I think I can always step from – I go from each level, really, right? So just – everyone knows the main guys, right, for the most part, right? The Ali Gage, the Andre Anthony's, your BJs. I think in the D-line, I thought Joe Evans had a fantastic spring. Yep. In the linebacker core, we all know who Damone is, right? But I think Smalls.
Jared had a great spring.
We call him Biggie Smalls.
Yeah.
But I think
he was a monster in the spring
Smalls
game.
had a heck of a spring. Overall, I mean, just to watch him progress. So you like where he was and where he's getting to be. In the back end, everyone knows Sting and Eli.
Pretty good corners.
Yeah, but I think I think Dwight Really, I was happy for Dwight in terms of watching him from day 1 to day 15. His mindset kind of changed. His approach changed. He was always a competitive guy. But I got so much respect from him watching him at practice. I mean, he may have gotten the most reps out of every corner, out of every corner we had, just because of our depth issues. But so I was really happy for him, and to watch him play in the spring game, to play with such confidence. So I was happy for him that we're in the corners room. And in the back end, also in the back end with the safety position, we asked a lot of Jay Ward for a position change. It wasn't supposed to be a position change. It was supposed to be a temporary deal, but it became a position change.
He was pretty good at it.
It was some things he does natural that stood out on tape, and I was just thankful and that he not only accepted the challenge, but he was open to the challenge. Some guys are like, "Nah, coach, I don't want to change positions. I don't want to do that." But the competitors and the football players, and that's just what LSU Tigers are about. One thing I noticed about this team as a whole, offense, defense, special teams, guys are so unselfish, and guys are willing to do whatever it is that's in the best interest of LSU Tigers. And Coach O says it best. One team, one heartbeat, and this spring you could really see it come to life. For me, who's new to it.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's good to know that you kind of pop in and you can feel that immediately. You came from Minnesota. I asked Twitter if they had any questions, and Rube at RJD12 on Twitter asked, could you tell Jefferson was going to be a star during Vikings training camp?
Yes. You could tell he was going to be a star. I don't think anyone imagined the type of year he had. This early, he was special from the moment we stepped foot on the field. And I remember, so defensive back coaches, we stand in the back, right? So I'm back there, and Coach Zim, we're back there. We're just, we're looking from the defense perspective. And Jets kind of ran an in-break, and I ran a dig route, and the ball was thrown slightly behind him. But he had already left in the air, right? And so he's in mid-air, and the ball is behind him, and his body like twist and turn, and he just kind of like snagged it, and brought it back, and just when he hit the ground, the turnover and just the acceleration and burst, and I looked at Coach Zim. He's going to be special, So you knew early on that he had it, that he had the talent, and so we were all pleased in the building, and then just to watch what he's done, to watch really. What people didn't see is the work that he put in after practice. Yeah. Right? It was after practice, everybody's walking off the field. He's doing extra routes. He's always snagging the balls. You would see him on air run through the practice calls, the play sheet. So he'd just be running the routes. He'll see the formation, see his assignment, and he'd be just on air working through his steps, working through his releases. And so you knew that he was special. And I like to attest it to not only them, but what he learned from being in this program, how to be a pro, how to take the game to another level in the approach. And I think LSU football and Coach O has done a great job, and the staff that he's had has done a great job of educating guys and showing guys the way, so to speak.
Got a couple more minutes with you. I want to ask you a couple questions that I had planned, and then I'll get to one more fan question. So when you got hired, we send out an email internally, and it says, welcome to LSU, Daronte Jones. It goes out to everyone in the athletic department, and it has like a little questionnaire that I guess you filled out at some point. Okay. And so it asked about your interests, and one of your interests was reading. So I got to ask you a book question because I'm a reader. Okay. Are you actively reading books right now? Or because I know football coaches get in football mode, and they're just, they're reading playbooks instead of, nonfiction or whatever. But if you are reading now, what are you reading? If not, maybe a book recommendation, one that you've read recently.
Well, I'll give you one of my favorite books of all time. And actually, I just put one of our coaches on to it. This book kind of changed me a little bit in my thought process, and it was suggested to me. And it's an old staple, right? Everyone probably has read it before, but it's by Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. That book had a major impact on me because it's about people skills. It's about what we do. It's about relationships. So That's one of my favorite. The book that kind of got me into reading when I was younger, because most kids don't want to read anyway, right? But Nathan McCall, Makes Me Want to Holler, got me into the reading aspect of it. And then right now I'm just reading, what is it called? God's Plan. And I just started reading about, I do want to mention Instincts by Bishop T.D. Jakes. Phenomenal book, Instincts by Bishop T.D. Jakes, that I just recently finished.
Okay, perfect. 2 more personal questions, and I'll end on the football one. Based on your Instagram, I know you're into traveling, and I know you're into bourbon. So a bourbon recommendation and then a travel recommendation. Maybe just name drop a few places you've been, and then give me like the top place you visited.
Well, I try to travel twice a year. This is pre-COVID. So I've been to, actually some Europe places. I've been to Paris, Amsterdam, London, been to Milan, Venice. I've been to Sydney, Australia. I've been to Hong Kong. I've been to Taipei.
Jeez.
Thibodeau. I've been to American Samoa. I've been to Barcelona. My recent trip is Barcelona. I went to Monaco and Nice. Did a little South of France tour. But the special trip, the trip that meant the most to me, I went 10 days to Israel. I took my mom and my aunt and my uncle to Israel 2 years ago, which was phenomenal. I thought Iceland. I've been to Iceland. Iceland was phenomenal as well. But I thought I saw the Northern Lights. Wanted to see that. But the trip to Israel was amazing. We toured up and down the coast. Started in Tel Aviv, traveled up along the Caesarea. I saw the I went to went to Bethlehem. Crossed over. They couldn't take us to Bethlehem. My tour guide had to stop us, and we went to Bethlehem, but that was good. Went to Tiberias. It was just a phenomenal trip. Yeah. I saw the so there's where Jesus calmed the storm. So every day at that same time, the waters, they become a little rough, and then they calm to this day.
That's crazy.
So I think it's around 5 p.m.
Is that Sea of Galilee?
The Sea of Galilee, yes.
Got my Bible knowledge. Okay, I'm on my Bible knowledge game.
Yes.
Awesome.
And that's up by Tiberias, but yes.
Yeah.
The Sea of Galilee.
How'd you get into traveling? What do you like about it?
Noam Chow got me to traveling.
Oh.
I was in Hawaii, and he would travel. He and his wife Diane would travel often, and I was like, man, Coach, that's got to be expensive to travel. He's like, no, it's not expensive. You know, as people spend their money what they want to spend their money on. So you can a couple $100, you can go wherever you want to go. And so I started to travel when I was in Hawaii, and I never forget my first place that I went to was Zurich. I had no idea. I went to Zurich, and I went to the other places from there. But I realized once I got into Zurich, I was like, man, I don't speak the language here. I don't understand these signs. Right? It didn't hit me until I got there.
Yeah.
But you follow the crowd off the plane, so you kind of, if everybody's heading in the same direction, you figure that must means baggage claim or exit, right? Red means stop and green means go. But anyway, that's what got me into traveling. I love it. I've usually traveled by myself. The only trips I went with people were my family to Israel, and then me and a couple buddies went to Brazil. Yeah. But that was it. Oh, and then for the bourbon selection.
Yeah, bourbon selection.
I'm anything. I'm a huge Buffalo Trace distillery fan.
There you go.
That and Michter's. So anything from those two. Four Roses is really good as well.
Yeah, I like Four Roses.
Small batch select is good. So it's a lot of good things.
Okay, yeah, I'm a novice bourbon drinker, but I'm gonna add that to my game. All right, we'll finish on a football question, and I appreciate your time very much. Scott Burns on Twitter asked, how has your defensive approach adapted to the rise of the spread offense that has taken college football by storm? So, we talk about old LSU defenses and the 03 defense and the 07 defense and these great units, and the game has just changed so much since then. So, and you've been there for your whole coaching career, seeing it evolve. So how has your defensive scheme adapted to, sort of goes back to the conversation we were having earlier.
It makes you defend the entire field.
Yeah.
That's where it's going to, even in the NFL world. You realize a lot of NFL coaches are clinicking with collegiate coaches because they want to expand. There's no more. You rarely see a fullback on anybody's roster these days,
Mm-hmm.
and so you have to adjust, right? It's being able to defend the field. What coverages are best for that? They want to take space, and so the way the philosophy is impacted by that is what type of player you're recruiting.
Mm-hmm.
So the world of the box safeties are kind of no longer.
It's
right?
funny. I had a question about that. That's great.
That 270-pound middle linebacker is no longer.
Mm-hmm.
Those guys, they're all going down a level.
Mm-hmm.
And so that box safety is now becoming what is a hybrid backer.
Mm-hmm.
That 270-pound is now becoming a DN,
Mm-hmm.
a rush in, or a stand-up guy. And you're getting corners who probably doesn't run as well, and they're smart
Mm-hmm.
to play safeties. It's just the recruiting aspect, the position is changing. The defensive personnel is changing because of such.
Yep.
And you have to have more guys out because everybody's going to go 3 and 4 receivers.
Yep.
Whereas you would load up on linebackers for special teams at different places like that. But it's changing the personnel, I would say, across the board. That's why around 35 to 40 corners are going to get drafted every year.
Yep. Games change.
Yes.
Well, we're glad to have you here, Coach. Thank you for joining today. Thanks, everyone, for watching live and for everyone else who asked questions on Twitter. I know we took you out of a recruiting meeting, so I'm sure you got some recruits to
that's
call.
Mine wasn't on my deal.
Yeah. No, I know you've. That's part of the college game. So I'm sure as soon as we get done, you'll probably be on the phone or texting or doing something with recruiting. So, but appreciate 30 minutes of your time, and
appreciate you for having me.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing your defense out there on the field this fall.
Thank you.